Gully erosion accounts for a large proportion of the sediment that's lost from three major catchments in the Gisborne region. It accounts for about 60% of the North Island's total suspended sediment loss. Landcare research has established that reforesting pastoral farmland reduces gully erosion substantially, leading to lower amounts of topsoil leaving the land.
Mangatu Forest is at the headwaters of the Waipawa catchment. It's about 70 kilometres inland from Gisborne. It's an area that was a clear feld of indigenous forest around the 1900s, right through to the 1920s. And it was soon after that that the landscape started to fall apart, and local visitors realised that land was not sustainable under a pastoral regime. Some of the consequences of the erosion in the uplands were starting to be felt downstream in the Poverty Bay area, with increased flooding and perceived threat to Gisborne City. So the Forest Service came here in 1960 and took over the land blocks. It was about 14,000 square kilometres, and they progressively reforested that area. There are gullies which form part of the stream drainage system. The power of the water erodes these stream systems out and they suddenly become gullies. There are other features in there called slumps. There are also shallow landslides. They're the basic principles whereby the land sort of starts to collapse, and when it collapses, all the sediment generated from those features ends up in the river system. The river system starts to erode, and then of course the sediment breaks down and comes further downstream, transported downstream as suspended sediment, and that ends up in the Poverty Bay Flats. The Waipawa is one of the most heavily laden in terms of suspended sediment. It transports or yields about 15 million tonnes of suspended sediment annually, and that's delivered to the ocean. And that's huge by world standards for such a small catchment. The colours on the map show areas of the different types of erosion. The red is gully, the blue is earth flow, and the brown is slumping. These are just different forms of landsliding. You can see the extent that the erosion had developed to under a pastoral regime by 1960. In 1988, we had a significant cyclonic event known as Cyclone Bola. The impact on Mangatu Forest was actually not very significant at all, because by 1988 this whole area had been planted in exotic forest, and you will see the dramatic reduction in all the forms of erosion because they've basically been protected by the canopy of trees. There is a window of vulnerability between the harvesting of one crop and the forming of the canopy of the replacement crop. It's about a 5, 6, 7 year window. And the risk really only comes, it's not the harvesting practice itself that's the problem. It's if that period in time, a storm happens to coincide with that particular phase of harvesting. This is an individual gully that has been photographed, oblique photography, at 3 points in time, 1961, 1972 and 2004. The first photograph in 1961 shows the gully in its raw state. You can see the area around it is still farmland. If we go to the next photograph, 1972, you'll see that the trees have been in the ground for about 9 or 10 years. The last photograph, you can see that the gully has fully stabilised. There are no holes in the tree canopy. So that means there is no more sediment coming out of that feature, and this is basically the process of how forestry works in stabilising gullies.
This program was made with funding from New Zealand On Air.